So can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
So by my calculation, it is 7 o'clock, and from where I sit here in Port Ludlow Resort, the sun has set over the yard arm. So we're ready to start. And so welcome aboard. Welcome new members. I'm glad to introduce you. If there are any others, welcome aboard. And so we'll
passport.
Here's tonight's agenda. We're going to talk a little bit around our business meeting to start with, and then we'll have a sort of a conservation report, outings report, fishing reports, and we'll need to repeat those that have happened. The reports that have happened over the last hour, so those who just recently joined us can share with the information. Wind knots, of course, of which there are none, and then we'll welcome Greg to the podium here to talk about running wild and scenic rivers, which I'm looking forward to. I'm having been a wooden drift boat owner myself. So we'll start first with the announcements. So I didn't see Warren on the call, but if he was, he would remind you that the Spring Merrill Lake cleanup is Saturday, April the 3rd at 9 a.m. Please sign up with Warren. And there you see his contact information. And if you're looking at going, please jot it down quickly. We do need to have a list. COVID restrictions will apply and protections, but we do need to know who's coming to this and all events. So one, we can follow up if there's any updates in timing or scheduling going forward. The second is membership renewal is due by March the 31st, or you turn into a pumpkin. I'll talk about the memberships here in a minute, where we're at, but there are a number of you who are on this call, I believe, who have not renewed. So please get your dues to Phil ASAP and make sure it comes in with a signed membership form. Perry and Phil, I believe, will follow up with some of you if you have and remind you further. But save them that call and get your dues in for 2021. Almost said 2022. So to move into some of the sort of the details of the operations of the club, we'll be giving sort of a club report as sort of standard operating procedure here once a quarter. Our current membership is at 124 paid members. There are 53 non-renewing members, which is a little higher than we would like to see. COVID is providing all nonprofit organizations a bit of a challenge when they can't meet in person, and that sort of in-person meeting is a value that a lot of folks have in being with a club such as ours or a nonprofit organization. That's why I think there's some of that lies there. Some of it's just folks have not responded to our calls for your 2021 dues. But so again, please bring those in if you haven't yet. The club remains in good financial condition. It always has been over the last decade due to the great management of the board. Phil's has been doing an outstanding job for over 9 years in managing the finances of the club. We currently have about $11,000 in cash in hand in our cash accounts, and we have an accumulated grant reserve of over $46,000. Those are monies that we have raised through our banquet and other fundraising efforts, and they are dedicated solely to our conservation activities, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And so they cannot be used for the operations of the club or any other events. They must be spent towards, by policy, be spent towards conservation activities. We have about $24,000 in operating reserves, and those are by the policies of the board. Those are set aside for emergencies for the operations of the club. And so we're, as a very healthy organization, we have about $82,000 in total assets. That is due in large part to the outstanding management of the previous board's directors. So if you're a previous board member, you're in on this call and not on the current board, congratulations. And if you're the current board, we have quite a bit of responsibility going forward to keep that keep this going in the club. We are in the process of doing our biennial audit of the club's finances. You may not know this, but every couple of years, the board members assign a number of directors who is not a member of the officers to basically go through the books over the last couple of years and look at all the expenditures and make sure that everything seems to be shipshape. And that's really just to provide another set of eyes to see if we've missed anything over the previous couple of years. And so that's another one of those, I think, pieces of outstanding management that have led us to where we are today. What we're doing as a board, some of this is like watching paint dry, I'm sure, but we're continuing to review the club's bylaws and operating procedures. We've looked at them twice now, and every time we want to make some refinements, my goal is we'll bring to the membership at this meeting in April a revised set of bylaws and a revised set of policies and procedures for you to renew for the next couple of years going forward. So we're taking a fine-tooth comb through our bylaws and operating procedures and updating them updating them. One thing we will be bringing to the board next month, and I want you all to weigh in on this if you have any point of view, is we're going to have a really robust discussion about membership in the organization. Membership and membership categories, dues, and one that may be of interest to you, access and distribution of the membership list. As a practice, we don't share that membership amongst members, and there's a discussion on why don't we do that. So we're going to talk about that as a board. And then I guess one of the most important points is how we're going to maintain and expand and diversify the membership. This is something we're very serious about this year to sort of broaden the scope of the club, to bring more new members, younger members, more diverse members, more women into the club. And how do we go about doing that proactively? I think much of our membership is here because that's who has joined us. And I think we need to maybe be a little more proactive about getting more involved in the club and fly fishing as a sport and our conservation activities. So my point in bringing this up to you now is that if you have any thoughts about membership, any of these topics or other topics, please get a hold of me, email me, and make sure that it's brought up during that board discussion. We can't discuss issues if we don't know about them. And so please contact us so that we can make sure you incorporate your points of view. So in looking at conservation as one of our major activities, I'm not sure the board or the membership is really aware of how much we've done over the last 20 years. And so we've maintained meticulous records about what we've done every year within conservation grants, but I don't remember ever seeing it all put together in one place. So I kind of like numbers, so I spend some time sort of crunching those. But over the last 20 years, we've made over 143 grants to 43 separate organizations for over $320,000 funding conservation activities. And those have ranged from habitat restoration and fisheries enhancement, which is our major investment, to land acquisition, which is another major acquisition, such as our most recently contribution to the purchase of the mouth of the Grand Round River over in Idaho, as it empties into the Snake to provide access for fishing, to research, which is some of our work around the Deschutes River and water temperature issues, and down to advocacy, which is around such as activities around the Green River mine. So we have made some significant investments as a result of our fundraising activities. And I think we all need to really sort of to do two things. We need to congratulate ourselves for being involved. And I think we need to congratulate ourselves for being a part of the solution to many of the challenges for making sure that the fish are available for both us and future generations. So $320,000 is nothing to sneeze at as far as a small nonprofit organization such as ourselves. And so hopefully we'll continue to make those sort of significant investments going forward. I would like to, I'm not sure Donna's on the call tonight, but I want to thank her for heading up the 2021 banquet committee. So, and her committee, both the participants and herself. A tremendous amount of work went into getting ready for our annual conservation and banquet, our Flyfishers Folly. COVID laid to waste our plans. However, there was a lot of planning that went underway. And Donna worked tirelessly at that, both she and her committees. Donna will not be available to be our banquet chair for 2022. And so while thanking her for her effort, I'm also recruiting for a new 2022 banquet chair. And as I told the board, I think this is also an opportunity to sort of think about how we want to do a banquet going forward in this sort of environment, which is still in flux. So anyone who may have an interest in sort of working with me and the board and others to sort of rethink and reshape and to restage a banquet in 2022, please get a hold of me. And if no one volunteers, we will move forth and twist arms. So thanks much. And thank you to Donna. Ed's not with us, so I will give the conservation report. So you must listen to me drone on just a bit more. I want to thank all the volunteers there. For the last 3 weeks, we've been out at Manley Creek. We've been out there planting, basically putting willow and other tree species and around the Manley Creek restoration, which is a tributary to the Lewis River. And we also then spent 2 weeks taking out the plastic debris and weed guards from the plantings over 10 years ago. And so I don't know how many bags of trash we took out of there. I only participated this last week, but you see all the other volunteers, Jerry Brass, Steve Jones, Chris, Peter Anderson, Jim Williamson, Ed, Peter Anderson, David Plunkett, Jack Whitney were there. Thank them. And I also want a special thanks to CSF member Tom Dwyer, who basically organized this and has been coordinating the cleanup. I've only participated in a couple of conservation activities over the last, let's say 5 months. I see the same people every time there, so thank you. And I would say that if any of you have some time and want to spend some time in the great outdoors, doing something other than fishing, our conservation activities would be a great thing to do. So, we have a pretty good time. It's great fresh air. It was a beautiful day out there, so please volunteer. The board did approve a conservation grant, of course, out of those grant reserve funds I mentioned earlier, to the Lower Columbia Fisheries Enhancement Group, a grantee that we have funded in the past. And in fact, truth be told, they are our largest grantee, and that's because they're out doing the work. We are providing them a grant of $2,000 to support their facilities for growing the plants that we're doing the planting. So they've been forced to relocate their nursery. It'll be now at the Toutle River High School in the burgeoning metropolitan community of Toutle. And they'll be relocating their nursery there in collaboration with the Toutle High School. There'll be about 60 students that'll be involved in this process over the next 3 years. And what they'll be doing is growing their own planting stock versus purchasing it. And so, in fact, we're going to be supporting one of their nursery facilities, a construction shed that they need to purchase to place their tools and other things in. And so they'll be using our funds to grow the plants that we will then in turn plant. So the board thought it was a great investment that involved students and it supported our main mission of conservation and enhancement. Ed Wickersham has resigned from the board of directors and as conservation director. And I want to personally thank him, not only what he has done in my brief 3 months here on the board, but what he's done in the past for the club and for conservation. Ed was actually the president of CSF when I joined over 21 years ago. And since that time, he's been deeply involved in the club, both on the board, within the banquet, and of course, deeply involved in conservation, both with CSF, CSA, and any number of other organizations that are doing fisheries conservation in Southwest Washington, the Columbia, and in Washington State. And I want to thank him on behalf of the board for his contribution to that. I also then want to also welcome David Swank, who will serve as our interim conservation director. And the only reason, David, I'm naming you as interim is that I haven't looked at the bylaws to see what it's going to take to make you permanent. So don't think you're getting away. But I want to thank David for stepping up. And at our next meeting, I didn't tell him I was going to do this, but he can sort of step up and tell us his background, and if you don't know it already. And I think he's going to be a great fit for carrying on our conservation agenda going forward. So with that, I'm going to end this and turn it over to Michael to talk about our outings update.
Could I just jump in real quick for 30 seconds and mention last night's Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife meeting? I had sent this out to a few of you. This is Paul Smith. I listened in, but I was not able to take notes. And I heard some fairly alarming things from WDF&W on their lack of concern for walleye, definitely in many of the lakes. But most importantly, he literally said that it's not a concern for us in the Columbia and the Snake. And that was shocking for me to hear that. So I can reach out to Dave on that. I don't know if anyone else had, I had Ed and a few of you on, and so did anybody else listen into that meeting and take notes?
No, I appreciate you putting that out. I didn't have the opportunity to participate last night due to other commitments, but was this the only opportunity for public input into this issue, or is there going to be?
No, it was the only time for the audio. And I'm really hoping they have a recording of that, because it would be interesting to listen to that. But they poo-pooed so in the right-hand column, right, when you have questions to any of these kind of Zoom meetings and such, you can, submit a question, and they were answering them. But what is quite which was just irritating, is when they don't read it verbatim. And they say, well, the guy tries to, well, let me, what's the word I want to say? Make it smaller, right? And no, say it verbatim, because they mixed it up a couple of times and made it completely wrong. When I don't know of any blue ribbon walleye fishery. And the person was specifically, I think, talking about blue ribbon trout fishing. And he had said, yeah, well, there's some blue ribbon walleye fishing, definitely. And I'm really concerned about those numbers if they get too small. And he also said that numerous times that the economy is very important to Washington State when it comes to non-native fish species for fishermen. And I would really like to know what the bylaws are for WDF&W, and their mandate should be first and foremost conservation of wild fish, not the economy, not allowing fishermen to have the opportunity for non-native species. And so we have until April 5th to give written comment. And I can, so if you want to forward that out, or I can resend that to you. But I sent it to Dave Swank and Marv and yourself, Ed, a couple other people, Don Kohler. I didn't have Jones's email, and Hutch. So if it would really behoove our club to be able to put in input.
Lonnie is the president of the Lower Columbia Walleye Club. You might see that he gets it.
Right.
So
and I'm not opposed to walleye fishing, but to not focus on trying to eradicate, or at least deal with the walleye and smallmouth bass in the Columbia, yet they've got an eradication program for a native species that is the northern pike minnow. It's shocking to me. And I asked in one of the questions, what are you doing about walleye, and are you doing any surveys for predation of salmonids by walleye and smallmouth? And he said, well, yeah, up in Kitsap County, there's a lake. And no, I don't care about lakes. If you plant salmonids in lakes, that doesn't matter. I'm talking specifically about the Columbia and the Snake and any rivers, creeks, and beaver ponds. So he was saying we don't plant any walleye in any of those, but for him to not be concerned about walleye in the Columbia, which definitely there is a complete walleye fishery now in the John Day and the Dalles pools. And they, along with northern pike, are becoming a real predatory problem in the Columbia.
So let me coordinate with, this is Bart, let me coordinate with Dave and others. At a minimum, we'll get this out to all the members
Yep.
so they can weigh in with their personal point of view on this. To doing that.
Yeah, there's definitely numerous folks in our group that have some extra clout from their current and historic positions. So,
okay.
Anyway,
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, sorry for it was longer than 30 seconds.
I knew it was going to be.
Ouch.
No, when anyone prefaces this is only going to be a second, even I do. Whatever. So, happy St. Patty's Day, Michael. Do you want to talk about
Sure.
our upcoming outings? And thank you, Paul.
And have a dram of good Irish whiskey for me. Just go to the next slide. All right, so the next outing is Lake Lanice. We talked a little bit about that beforehand. Dan Green and Steve Jones are the fish masters for that. I don't know, is Dan or Steve on? So we had some conversation about this in the pre-meeting. There's been a few folks out there. The fishing's been really good, but it's also been really crowded. So, but this is a good outing to get out if you haven't been out to one of the outings with the club yet. Fairly easy access. I think it's less than about a quarter-mile walk from the parking lot down to the lake, and there'll be, I think, a number of people that have signed up for this one. Just a reminder too, obviously you need your Washington fishing license renewed here at the 1st of April. Next slide. And then we go to the East Lake, May 2nd through the 6th, and Roy and Donna are the fish master there. I don't know, Roy on or Donna by any chance?
Yeah, I'm on. This is Roy.
Okay. I don't know, Roy, I just give you an opportunity if there's anything special you want to say, or how many people you got signed up at this point, or accommodations.
Yeah, at this point, I've only heard from 6 people. So if people would call me or email me with their information, with their phone number and where they're going to be staying, it would be helpful.
Okay. Next slide, Bart, please. And then we go to the Crooked River, and Kirby's fish master for that. I think Kirby's on. So Kirby, anything you want to add here for this outing?
I believe it should be a good outing. The weather should be great, and we'll hope that there's some more than small fish in that river. So everybody's welcome.
Well, the record rainbow came out of that river years ago. So there are at least one big fish in that river at one point. All right. And then we go to the John Day for smallmouth bass. And Mark Meyer and myself are going to be the fish masters for that. I'm going to drive out Saturday, do a recon on that. I think we're going to plan on meet at Spray at the boat ramp there on Saturday morning, just to go over, a few safety rules. And if you haven't floated this river before, I am just double checking, but my assessment to this point is you do not need a boating pass to float from Spray to Service Creek. But if you're floating from Service Creek on south to like Twickenham, then you would need a permit. But I'm going to confirm that. And if you let me know that you're going to the outing, I'll make sure and send you the link to the Oregon site to get your float permit. There's no cost for it, but you do have to obtain a permit if one is required. And then the last one we'll talk about today is Coldwater Lake. Julie, or did you join?
Julie's not here, but I can talk.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay,
But Phil,
go ahead.
But Phil can talk. No, I'm here. Phil and I went to the board and were approved for the deposit to the Institute, but we're just kind of waiting to hear back from the Institute to make sure they agree with the terms of, you know, can we get a refund should COVID restrictions come back? And so we're kind of working out details. One of the major differences is the Institute won't be providing food at this point. It may change as we get closer to June, but right now it could be a potluck situation, provide a meal for Saturday. We have full use of the kitchen. So other than that, we're just kind of just putting the final details together. Phil, anything else?
I just would add that we were able to have this outing for the first time 2 years ago. And I think we had, almost 40 people there. It's a wonderful environment, a gorgeous view of Coldwater Lake from high on one of the ridges. And there's also going to be a presentation on the eruption that you could see St. Helens from the Institute's facilities there. And I hope that we can get Michael Dukas to also be at the outing, because he was one of the geologists that was brought in to survey the results immediately after the eruption and throughout that summer. And he gave just a great talk. So it's a great way to socialize and meet your other club members.
Yeah, the picture behind me is from the observatory, and it was just a perfect clear night, had the moon out. And I think it's going to be a full moon. It's that Father's Day weekend. So hope everybody can come. And we'll be sending out, once we get confirmation from the institution, the sign up, so you guys can sign up and get your payments in. And so that'll be coming too, and it'll be in the Barb as well.
All right, great, thank you. And Bart, that's the last one for this this month.
Outstanding. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Fishmasters, and make sure you contact the Fishmaster if you're going to be attending the trips. Then keep an effective nose count and can contact you if things change as these trips move forward. So fishing reports. There were some number of fishing reports discussed in the pre-meeting in the wet fly hour, and so why don't those folks step up and let us know how it went. Let's start first with the outing on the Olympic Peninsula. I understood we storm-mouthed the few steelhead.
Yeah, it's John Grant. I think I'm the only one. There were 5 of us there, and there were 3 of us: David Swank, myself, and Jeff. I've forgotten Jeff's last name, but anyway,
Prutach.
We floated. What's that?
Prutach.
Prutach, that's correct. Anyway, we floated the Bogachito, and there were probably 30 other fishermen on the river, and we didn't see much going on. Our group caught 4, landed 4 fish and lost 1 or 2. And it was very interesting that David hooked the first steelhead about a couple hundred yards after the launch. Oh, okay. Dave's on now. I just see him on the screen, and that was one that got off the hook because they were all barbless hooks that day. I don't remember what the other 2 fellows did as far as catching fish. It didn't sound like it was very hot on their side either. They were on the sole duck, and also on the quill ute. What else happened, David?
Yeah, so I don't know. We heard from Steve and John that they didn't have any hookups the first day. I don't know what the report was from them on Saturday. Yeah, for us it was. It seemed like it was going to be a really good start because I hooked up with a steelhead the very first hole, lost it after 2 or 3 minutes of fighting it, And then the very next spot we stopped, Jeff hooked and landed about a 24, 25-inch hatchery female. That was it for adult steelhead for the rest of the trip. I landed one little steelhead smolt about 6, 7 inches, a whitefish about 12, 13 inches, and Jeff caught a cutthroat second day about 15 inches, I think he said. But yeah, the fishing overall was fairly slow. Catching was slow. It was still a nice outing.
It was great.
Weather. Yeah.
Always a beautiful day up there. So are there any other reports?
Carol and I spent 3 days over on the Metolius, and on my 4th trip over there, I finally landed my first rainbow. But I was also able to meet a young man, Christian, and he and his wife, Danielle, are joining our club meeting night for the first time. So everything went really well. I had a very productive weekend.
So welcome, Christian, and that's a great report for the first fish. I'll repeat what was said earlier during the report. The east side has been fishing very well. I fished Quincy Lake and brought maybe about 20 fish to hand, up to 20 inches. So, and there are others who are fishing just as well. Steve Cushing and Rick Smith did fish Lanice on the opener and did equally as well. Very unusual early season weather over there. There was little to no wind. Very cold starts to the morning, got up in the mid-50s or mid-40s, low 50s, but no wind. So it was very enjoyable. Large crowds at Lanice, hardly any crowds at Quincy. And I went and also spent a full day at Lenore, tracking down rumors that it was starting to recover from those days. There were some very significant water quality and poaching problems at Lenore. And so it didn't fish well for about a decade. There were rumors that it was coming back, and I think the jury's still out. I caught a couple of very large Lahontan cutthroat, but not as many as I expected I would if the lake was really in shape. So east side's definitely fishing very well for this early in the season, and it bodes well for the east side outing. Any other reports? Any other rumors of reports? Then we'll move on to wind knots. So steelhead fishing always produces at least one wind knot. So I expect one to come back from the Olympic Peninsula outing, at least one. Dave, no? No?
No, everything went perfectly. One of the new oars I got from Dave Skadden turned out to be faulty. They drilled one of the holes incorrectly, so it just lifts water when you use it. But I don't know if that quite qualifies as a wind knot on my part.
No. No, you
really
can't charge the manufacturer. So. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Dave, you might want to mention what John Bornson and Steve Jones had to do to get under the bridge there at Randecker with the guide. That's not a wind knot, but it's an interesting story.
I'm back.
Oh.
Yeah, I can firsthand.
Oh yeah, there you are. Good.
Yeah, we just rejoined. We're just able to rejoin. But it was interesting because the path that you used to take on the left underneath that bridge is all filled up with a huge log jam now. And so as we approached the right side, our guide, Terrence, was saying, well, you might need to get out. I'm going to lead the boat through because it's too skinny. And then we will meet on the other side of the bridge. Well, as we got closer, he says, oh, I think I can make it, but I'm going to get out and I'm going to push and hold on to the boat. He says, oh, by the way, if I lose the boat, you can pick me up on the other side of the river. maybe floating down to you.
Okay.
Hey, John, what was the report for your second day?
About the same as the first.
Outstanding, Dave.
A lot of casting. My spay casting really improved.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't hear any wind knots, and that's okay. Sometimes that happens. I've been asked a couple of times about this picture for wind knots. That is from the infamous 2011 club trip to Loretto, which in 2 days over 9 rods were broken by Feisty Dorado. So that happens, and that's the picture of all 9 rods and their pieces. So. Okay, well, let's get out there and go fishing and develop some wind knots and some more stories. So we'll move on to tonight's program, and I'll turn it over to Chris. To introduce our speaker. Chris?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm going to let Greg kind of tell a little bit of his own, briefly, how he's connected with our area and what he's done. But I will tell how I found out about him or met him. It was a few years ago that we were over at Fort Flagler camping with Steve and Perry Muich. And Signe was listening to the radio, and she came out and she said, "You need to come in and listen to this. There's a radio interviewing this guy, and he's really interesting. He's a fly fishing guide from down on the Mackenzie, and it's something about a wood boat he's got in the show." And when I went in, it was so interesting that we got to go see what his presentation is. So 4 of us went over the next day, and we went to some other things, but we managed to get into Greg's presentation. And that room was packed, and it was full of all kinds of people, and it was very enjoyable. So Signe mentioned, you know, since I was getting programmed, she said, "Well, what about that one we saw over at Fort Flagler or Port Townsend?" So obviously it'd been interesting enough, we made notes and left them in the trailer in our log. So I found enough that I kind of Googled and I was able to reach Greg. And I asked, "Would you be willing to give some kind of a presentation for our club?" And he was just more than willing, surprised that I came out of nowhere. And so tonight, he is going to do a presentation from Missouri because he's back there instead of the West Coast right now for a bit. And I'll leave it with that. And Greg, maybe you can briefly kind of give your background and then move on into the presentation.
Yeah, that sounds good. Chris, thanks for the intro. And I didn't realize you had to work so hard to hunt me down, but I'm glad you did. And I'm happy to hang out with the group here tonight. I really enjoyed the happy hour and just hearing all the fishing banter and whatnot. And I've kind of become a regular at Port Townsend. I started out as an avid fly fisherman. Steelhead was my fish of choice. And I chased those rascals all over the place by foot and by wader and by stream and underwater sometimes. But the first time I saw a wooden drift boat come around the corner on the Mackenzie River, I really fell in love with the whole dimension that wood boats bring to fly fishing, and specifically the amount of water you can cover chasing steelhead versus bushwhacking, which I'd been doing. And so then I kind of got into that whole wood boat world and chasing fish by boat. And I've really gravitated toward wild and scenic rivers. And so I've kind of become a one-man crusader for keeping wild and scenic rivers wild and scenic. And there are, you probably know this, but there's 210 wild and scenic rivers with that designation. I've been on about 100 of them. Oregon has more wild and scenic rivers than any other state by far. And that's partly why I've been on so many, because I'm an Oregon guy. I lived there for 10 years, moved back to the Midwest. Don't hold that against me. Aging parents that I'm taking care of right now. So I come out to Oregon, spend a lot of time out there in the summer and the fall. I was a guide on the Mackenzie River for about 10 years. And I didn't guide last year because COVID kind of blew everything up. But again, I'm pretty fond of steelhead, and there are some amazing summer steelhead on the McKenzie that really very few people fish for or know about, particularly above the dams. So I kind of feel like I've got my own little playground up there, and I would be happy to tell you all my favorite spots and all my favorite flies. And I'm pretty upset. I have this obsessive personality, and I actually have charted. I got a book where I chart all my runs, and it's kind of a distribution chart where I get hits and I get misses and I get hookups. And I've been offered a lot of money for this book, but I would be more than happy to clue you in on all my favorite spots and techniques. So when Chris asked me to put together something, what I came up with is kind of a little mini slideshow to take you to 3 of my favorite rivers. And if you don't want to go there, then I can just skip it. But I picked out 3 of my favorites to just give you about a 2-minute slideshow of some of my favorite photographs on 3 of my favorite rivers. And then I thought we would just talk about those experiences and maybe open it up to questions and then go to the next river. And as long as I keep going to the next river, we'll just keep going unless you want to cut me off. But I'm probably going to have the screen here for like maybe 30 minutes or so, if that's okay. The rivers I picked for you are, number 1, I thought we'd start off with the McKenzie because that's my home river and kind of home of the McKenzie style drift boat. We have any other wood boat geeks here at all? A little bit.
Yep.
We're going to do the McKenzie first. And then I did an interesting trip on the Rogue that I want to tell you about because it was pretty unique. I don't know if anybody's been on the Rogue, wild and scenic, chasing half-pounders and adult steelhead down in Southern Oregon. That's number 2. And then number 3, I thought I'd take you out to Idaho for the Middle Fork. Anybody been out there at all? A little bit? Mm-hmm. To row a wood drift boat on the Middle Fork was something I will never forget. It was as a challenge in any kind of boat, but man, I'll tell you, when you're rowing your own boat, your own wood boat that's a little bit fragile, through that kind of a rock maze, it really heightens the senses, if you will. So how does that sound? Can we do that? About 2 minutes on each river, just with some slideshow. Is that okay?
I think we go ahead and let's just go ahead and get started then, Greg.
You should be able to share your screen. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Am I good to go? Oh,
yep.
Good. So this is the McKenzie first. This is where I learned to row, and I'm going to take you through an interesting series of shots. If you've been there, you know there's a class 3 called Martin Rapids, and that's really where I learned most of what I know about avoiding disaster. And I love to guide that section because I like to give sound bites to my guests, my passengers in the boat, about the beauty and the maneuverability of drift boats, and particularly wood drift boats. And
so,
that
Greg, your screen is not shared at this point in time.
Oh, it's not?
I think you need to go down to the bottom of the screen and hit share screen, and let's see what happens.
Let's see. It's not sharing.
I've allowed multiple participants can share simultaneously.
Hang on.
I can change the setting to 1 at a time. Let me do that. Okay, I've changed the setting. Why don't you try now?
How's that?
There we go.
Okay.
Operator on my end. Sorry.
No. So what I'm going to take you through first is a nail biter. Basically, it is.
You might want to go to instead of preview mode, go to full slide mode.
Yeah, I'm going to talk over this for just a second, and then I'm going to take you there because once I start, I can't stop it. So what you're going to see is a series of shots that require a lot of maneuvering with the boat. And that's what I love to show people is how a drift boat moves through a class 3 rapid, because you really need all the features to keep the boat floating. So here you go. So that's just a kind of a preview of the McKenzie, and those are all hatchery fish, by the way. So we pluck them out of there and we skin them and we smoke them and we eat them, and we don't apologize for it. So there you go. We turn the native fish back, but there's a lot of steelhead above the dam on the McKenzie that not a lot of people know about, and not a lot of guides even fish for. So it's a special place, and it's special to me because I learned how to row a boat up there, and I'm pretty fond of above the dam, which is some pretty rocky stretches and some pretty cool rapids. But the steelhead are spectacular up there, and so are just the red sides are awesome. But anyway, I have written quite a few articles for a lot of outdoor magazines. We actually made the cover on this one, and that is the McKenzie that we're on the cover of. And most of my articles, if you have a chance to find my stuff in Gray Sporting Journal, Wooden Boat Magazine, etc., they're all most all of them have a flavor of keep the wild rivers wild and keep an eye on them, because there are so many people that really want to exploit those and put a dam, a tram, a pipeline. There's any number of additional uses and to commercialize them, and so I just, all my articles, I try to have a flavor for keep your eye on the wild and scenic rivers, because they're special, and somebody's always trying to take a pot shot at them, including the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon. I mean, that's protected every way you can think of, and yet every year somebody's coming up with a new idea to put a casino or a walkway or a bridge or something. So anyway, that's kind of it. Have any questions about the McKenzie, or any thoughts, comments, or?
Greg, do you fish Eagle Rock?
I do fish Eagle Rock, and I'm very.
Do you put it in a fin?
Yeah, I do. That's a good run, Fin Rock.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In fact, you saw a whole bunch of drift boats there on the lawn. That we started a wooden boat festival at Eagle Rock Lodge probably 15 years ago, because the wooden boats were kind of dying off a little bit, and we got so much traction with that wooden boat festival that it's become an annual deal. And it's
we used to stay right below there at Hazel's place.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, that's good. That's a real good, right in front of Eagle Rock Lodge. Is a great stretch to fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else been on the McKenzie? Nope. How about through
Greg?
Martin? Anybody been through Martin's
Greg?
Rapid?
Forrest Capone in here.
Yeah, hi, Forrest.
I need to ask you what kind of a boat you got.
That is it's a Tatman design. I built it out of mahogany and Alaskan yellow cedar on the ribs, and the oars are from Sawyer.
Nice. I showed a boat at the McKenzie boat show one time. It was awesome.
Oh, you did? Cool.
Yeah. Nice boat.
Yeah, thank you. It's been rebuilt a couple times. I think I put 3 new bottles. I tend to run with enthusiasm.
Hey, I got to throw in, somebody has got a television on or something. If everybody can look down and make sure that their mic is muted so he can have the mic by himself, because I'm hearing a lot of feedback from televisions or something.
How about you want to go to the Rogue River now? Everybody done with the McKenzie?
Yeah, it
Okay.
sounds like, because we can always catch back up on some that come up with Mackenzie.
Well, let me tell you just a little bit about the Rogue. Has anybody been down there on the Wild and Scenic section? Show of hands. No, yes. I think, Chris, I don't know if we circulated that link, but we can put it on the website later. But OPB did a special on our wood boat trip. There's a couple of us that still row wood down the Wild and Scenic Rogue, and they did a wonderful job kind of putting you in the front seat of those wooden boats, because there's a couple of us are just kind of throwbacks, and I'm right in the middle of all that. I camp in canvas and wool, row a wood boat, try to do things kind of just a little bit of a throwback deal. I've got some great sponsors I work with, including Pendleton Wool. So if you want to see some of my other writings, I do a lot of blogging for them, just write about where I've been and help them launch different blanket patterns that they have coming out. But I've done the Rogue every year for probably 15 years with the same group of river rats, and I've always rowed a wood boat, and I've always kind of wanted to do that solo. And if you've been down there, that's not probably a real smart thing to do. And I don't know anybody that's done it solo. I know people have done it, but I just don't know of any that have. But I just kind of had this itch, and I scratched it last year and did that river solo, that Wild and Scenic section. And doing that solo in a wood boat is it was quite an experience. There was a little bit of danger involved in that, and quite a bit of a stress in a few places. But I did that after the permit season, so it was late October, and there's nobody down there but me and half pounders. And I really took my time. I took about 5 days to do that. We normally do it in 3, but I took my time and camped in some very unique places. Captured some great photos of just camping alone and doing that stretch all by yourself. And I want to show you some of the results of that, because the sponsors kind of dug what I was doing. So I'm going to take you down. This is the solo trip. When you see pictures of my boat, there's about 3 of them in there. Those are OPB pictures from that special that they did. So other than that, I'm all by my lonesome down there. Okay, here you go. So that was a solo trip on the Rogue, and I'm writing an article right now. I've kind of been storing that one away and tinkering with it, but that's going to be a different kind of writing for me, because there was just a lot of, I mean, I had all these voices in my head for like the first day or two that I was down there, and then I kind of got used to the place, and I got more settled. But it was an interesting experience. I put together a list of all the things that could go wrong, and then how to manage those things. And I filled several pages of a book, and I stopped doing it because I was scaring myself out of going. So, but it was pretty cool. It was quite something. The biggest challenge I had was, if you know Rainy Falls, which is a class 5, 6, you got to line your boats around it. You saw me holding the rope of my boat, and that's about 1,000 pounds of boat when the water's pushing it and it's packed, and you've got to really, it's kind of like wrangling a boat down a flight of stairs with the water pushing and the line. It was quite something, and I had a bit of a spill there I was afraid I might, but that was a handful, getting the boat around Rainy Falls so you can continue your run. But other than that, it was a clean run. I did all the class 4s with no problem. Saw a couple of bears, but they kind of left me alone, and it was a good trip, really, quite something. Any questions about that, or?
Well, I wondered how was it photographed when you were there by yourself? Was that mixed
I
with
did
you?
I did all the photography except when you saw me in the boat. That was taken from the OPB trip that we did, the public. I pulled that out just because they're great shots, unique shots, and kind of, I ran that trip solo in my boat, but I was surrounded by 10 of my favorite river rats, which was different from this solo trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will put the link in the Google group for that. I watched that. Actually, I think I had seen it on OPV and then later watched it again. That was a great few minutes. I don't know, 10 minutes or so.
It was 10 minutes. Yeah. And I'll tell you, the guys that were filming that took bigger risks than we did. They were scrambling up rocks to get unique angles and shots. They really did a nice job. I wish they would have focused a little bit more on the food in that video and the fishing, because the fishing is always really good down there for half pounders. Has anybody chased half pounders down there at all, or no?
Yeah, we have people that go down in the fall for that. There's a few that go down a half dozen or so.
Yeah, it's great. It's just a great great experience when you're combining fly fishing with boating, and then throw in the camping and the riverside eating. That's a pretty good outing.
So what's the best timing and best part of the river for half pounders?
Well, I like the fall. The fall is kind of the best time frame, and you have to have a permit up until October 15th. And so we kind of like to run it when the permit season has expired, because then you don't have a lot of people. You have almost no one down there. You don't have the guides mostly stop guiding then. Your mornings are a little bit crisp, but the fish are in, and including the adults. And we've been catching more adults here lately in the last couple of years than we have half pounders, that's a nice thing to see. That's a real healthy sign. And I think a lot of it has to do with the dams coming down on the Rogue. That's kind of a big deal down there. I've been involved in some of those fights and doing some writing on that too. But I'd highly recommend, and there's a way to do that wild and scenic section with lodges, old lodges from like 1930s, 1940s. So it's a little bit more comfortable, because you can literally catch a week where it's nothing but rain, and that can be pretty miserable in a drift boat going down, for 3 days. So there's a way to do that in lodges, but it requires a guide most of the time. So, but I'd highly recommend it. It's awesome. How about if we move to the Middle Fork? Anybody been to the Middle Fork over in Idaho, Middle Fork of the Salmon? I'm going to take you there, and I was allowed, if you know.
I think Eric had a question.
Oh, yeah.
I see Eric's hand up.
Hey, Eric, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Greg. Just real quick, I was going to ask you, was that a solar-powered bear fence around your food, or was that already there, or did you pack that in?
I didn't pack that in, but there are bear fences down there because there's a lot of bear down there. And I showed that picture, and my wife saw that picture. She says, you know, well, that makes no sense. Why don't you just sleep inside the fence? Like, well, that kind of takes some of the fun out of it. we put our food in there. It's a battery powered, it should be solar, but they're big batteries that you hook up that fence at night. You put your coolers in there, of course, and your food, and then you hook up the fence, and they really work. I've made a mistake or two and been zinged. So they're fully charged, and they do keep the bears away. But yeah, and I didn't have a good answer for it. It's like, why don't you just sleep inside there? Like, I don't know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Probably because you'd get up in the middle of the night to go pee and walk right into that fence.
That's a deterrent right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering, did you bring that table with you? I see the same finished
beautiful table,
burl table in multiple settings.
Thank you for noticing.
I
built that slab table specifically for that trip because I wanted to show off for one of my sponsors that porcelain camp dinnerware is really cool, and it pops on that walnut slab, and it fits perfectly in my boat. I built it for that trip so you can screw in the legs and then take them off. But that was a table for one, and it was a room with a table with a view, I can tell you. But it worked pretty well. It shows off that dinnerware pretty nice, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. My dad used to make tables like that.
Oh, one of my other sponsors is Bare Bones Living, and they are out of Salt Lake City, and they've got some pretty cool stuff. I encourage you to check that out because they have a kind of an old school Dutch ovens, but everything has just a little bit of a flair, kind of an artistic kind of a, cool. But that's what I was showing off with the table was their dinnerware, and it showed off pretty well. And I got to cook. I mean, it was all by myself. So I cooked all my favorite things. It was scallops done in bacon grease, you know, and biscuits and eggs. And I just totally took my time. And I had more fun than I should have, because normally I'm surrounded by guys who are ready to giddy up and go or whatever. It's like, I wanted to fish a little bit longer. I fished a little bit longer. You know, if I needed to stay an extra day, I did. It was like incredibly liberating. And it also opened up a lot of campsites that I never even noticed before, because I usually travel in a pack of 8 boats, 10 boats, and you have to have a lot of room down there for that many. But a couple of those campsites that you saw literally were big enough for my tent and to park my boat. And I had some, I really had never even noticed those fun little places before this trip. And so I camped in some unique places. You may have seen one where I scrambled up kind of a big rock, almost a cliff, and parked my cot up there just because I could. It's like, that was so silly, but it was like, I had such a great view of the stars. And I mean, it was really quite unique. And it was one of the most selfish things I've ever done in my life. So there you go. If you want to be selfish, just take a solo trip down the road. How about the Middle Fork?
Okay.
So the Middle Fork is in Idaho, and I'll tell you, the Middle Fork and the Rogue were in the very first class of 8 rivers that were inducted into the first Wild and Scenic program in 1968, signed by Johnson. So he signed that bill and then inducted 8 rivers. The Middle Fork of the Salmon was one of those, and so was the Rogue, which is kind of cool. So I've always wanted to do the Middle Fork. I've never been able to pull a permit. And after 10 years, I gave up, and I called my buddy Ken Helfrich, who's a great guide and a very good friend of mine. And he guides on the Middle Fork. And I said, how about if I tag along? I will carry the poop bucket. I'll cook. I'll do dishes. Just let me, if it's possible, let me hang out with your group. I'll camp by myself, away from the paying customers, but I'll be an assistant, a camp cook or whatever. And he let me do that. And I followed that group down and kind of became one of them. And that's where I kind of got into there's a club in Portland called the Arlington Club. And those were all guys from the Arlington Club. So I've spoken to them a couple times because they thought I was of a curiosity that I would be a one-man show taking a wood boat down the Middle Fork. So that was the only way I could figure out to do it, because I was for 10 years and I'd had about enough of it. So I followed Ken's group and camped by myself and got some great pictures and wrote a pretty cool article about the Middle Fork and about how wild and scenic it is. So here you go. Here's the Middle Fork. There you go. There's the Middle Fork. That was quite a trip. Ken is a great guy. If you ever have a need for a guide to take you down the Middle Fork, I would highly recommend the Hellfish crew. They've done it longer than anybody, and they run a great show. And the food is spectacular. The guides are top notch, and a lot of them are good friends of mine as well. But that was quite something. That was my first time rowing down that river, and it was an experience I'll never forget. It literally, that first day was so steep. We started at the very top, called Boundary. If you've been down there, that big boat slide to get down to the river was an experience. That was an adventure in an adventure. But once you hit that water, that first day is like, it is nonstop action. It's almost so busy that you can't even fish, because it's just, I mean, it's steep and it's cool, but you got to be on your toes the entire time, and it's exhausting. But it was, again, it was quite something, quite something. Westlope cutthroat is what we were fishing for, and they were hungry and fat and sassy, and it was, you could throw just about, the bigger the better. Big, I mean, big flies, almost like a salmon fly hatch on the Deschutes. I mean, whatever you threw out there, the bigger the better, and they would hit with such a passion that it's, again, that's something I'll never forget. The fish were beautiful, but the take was incredible, because they would come flying out of the water to get that fly. And it was, partly it was our timing, because it was real early in the season, the water was up, and the fish were just kind of waking up, and they were just hammering everything. It was quite a trip.
Was your takeout at Riggins?
No, I don't think so, but it might have.
I'd done 110 miles on Corn Creek to Riggins, and back in 1991, and I rented a raft from WSU.
Cool.
And 3 of my buddies went with me, and it was pretty amazing. Did you come across a couple of hot springs?
Yes.
Yeah, that are right in the river, right next to the. Yeah, isn't that cool as hell to just sit in the hot spring? And they're too hot, so you got to find your space.
They are too hot, yes.
And then you just get a spot. But I saw one of the greatest things ever in my life was we were coming around about 10:30 in the morning one morning, and we were looking up, and we didn't have an oar frame. We were just using paddles, and there was 4 of us. And
wow,
we look up, and I saw a bunch of sparrowhawks, kestrels, hunting the huge grasshoppers, right? This was September. So kids have gone back to school, early September. And then The raft comes forward. Everyone's looking forward. There's a shadow. I see a sparrowhawk, what looked to be panicked. It hit the water in front of us. And right when it was trying to struggle to get off the water, boom, out of nowhere came a golden eagle and grabbed that sparrowhawk, went straight to the shoreline, sat down, looked at us like, get your own. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life to see a bird of prey kill another bird of prey.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. And then ramming rams and chucker and grouse, all of them, you probably notice that none of the animals, they don't care about you. They just look at you.
Yeah. And that is why you need to keep the wild rivers wild. And so some of the best writing I've done was about that trip, because I really hammer home that message about wild and scenic rivers and keeping them wild. I used the Middle Fork trip to get that message out there. And that article was published in Wooden Boat Magazine.
What year did you do that?
That was just like a couple years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So two questions. One, what level of skill do you need to have to do the Middle Fork? I mean, so for example, if you're comfortable doing the Olympic Peninsula, would you be comfortable doing the Middle Fork, or do you need a higher level of skill?
There were a lot of class 3s and class 4s, particularly in that first day. And I haven't seen too much on the peninsula that has quite the elevation drop. The challenge with the Middle Fork, it has one of the steepest drops of any river in North America that's navigable. And so that, particularly that first day, it just drops there's such a pitch there that you're constantly moving that boat to avoid rocks. And if you've had a lot of time on the oars, you can be comfortable doing that. But if not, you can get yourself pretty tangled up, particularly in a hard boat, which is less forgiving, because you hit some of those things and something happens that, that gunnel tips and you lose the boat quickly. So you've got to, I would just say anybody that can do a class 3 and class 4 and has spent a lot of time on the oars, you'd be fine. But it's a handful. I mean,
yes. I've been up the Olympic Peninsula on a couple of different, the Sole Duck and the Bogus Shield, and it's nothing like the Middle Fork. And like you said, the Middle Fork, which was freakish every day, it was something straight out of Fred Flintstone. You look up in all the rocks, and it's vertical. It's like you're going down a slide, but it's a river. Most rivers that you float, you feel flat, and it's like, oh, we're floating down a river, but it's flat. Not here. There, it's like you're going downhill on a slide.
Yes. From some of those pictures, the pictures don't even do it justice, because you can almost see the pitch in some of them where, it's like, how in the hell are we going to get a boat down through there? And you just do it. I mean, it's quite something. Quite something.
So my second question is, I'm about ready to start building my second boat. Your boat reminds me of mine, which is, you kind of feel like you're rowing a coffee table down the river. So I noticed that one of your other boats in your slides is painted. So paint versus varnish.
I have a strong opinion about that. And that painted boat was Ken Helfrich's. And most of their boats get knocked around so much that they like the paint because they can repaint it between trips. If you screw up a natural boat and hit something, it's screwed up. I mean, it shows a watermark, and I'm okay with that. I've got some pretty good beauty marks on my boat, and I don't care. That boat is dear to me, and I like it naturally finished. At some point, I'll have enough scars that I'll need to paint it, probably, or maybe not. I just kind of like it like it is, but it does show wear if you have a natural finish. But for me and my eye, there's just nothing quite as pretty as a natural boat made out of wood on a wild and scenic river. I agree. That's just personal preference. But
so what about leaking and smacking rocks? Because you have been on some gnarly rivers, and wooden drift boats often are on pretty wimpy rivers that there's no gnarly rocks that you're going to smack.
Yeah, you know, I didn't build that boat to knock it around, but I just developed this appetite for big rapids, and that boat performs so well. And you know, part of it is when you build a boat like that, you just know every freaking single inch of that boat and how it performs, and that's part of the beauty of being in my boat, because I just know that boat so well and what it can do and what it can't do. But I've busted it up a little bit. I didn't build it for the garage. I built it for the rivers. And so it's taken a beating. I've replaced chines. I've replaced the bottom a couple times. I know how to repair a boat. And if you're not willing to do that, then the wood boat's probably not for you, unless you're chasing steelhead on flatter water, which is what I built that boat for. More of a cruiser actually than a sports car. But it performs so well that you'd all be safe. You'd come with me. I'd give you a good ride, I promise. But it's,
I noticed earlier you mentioned something about a Tatman design. Was that a Greg Tatman design?
Yes, Greg Tatman is a good friend of mine, and that's what's
okay.
Whole silly mess. Do you know him?
Because no, but my buddy built a Tatman kit back in the 90s, and that was one wonderful drift boat that we used on a lot of rivers in Oregon and on the Deschutes. So familiar with that design
also. So mine's a Tatman.
He built one of his kits. Is Greg still alive?
Greg, you're muted now. Need to unmute. There you go.
Tatman's no longer selling boats, right?
Correct.
Okay, good.
His company ended up in the hands of a very good friend of mine named Randy Dersham.
Okay.
Yeah, and he used to own Eagle Rock Lodge. Last time I saw Greg Tatman was about 4 years ago at the McKenzie Woodboat Festival.
Yeah.
Got Parkinson's.
Oh.
I don't know if he's still or not, but he was a great guy and kind of got me started with the whole thing. Yeah.
That's too bad. My buddy has passed away, so yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, you can cut me off at any time. I got no more slides. I could talk about wood boats and steelhead and fly fishing all night long. So, but I appreciate you having me on here, and just loved hanging out with you all. And so would love to fish with you sometime. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. I don't fish much in Washington. I got to tell you, I need to correct that. There's a lot of rivers on my bucket list in Washington.
There you go. So, Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much.
Greg, I just got, I didn't want to stop it because people seem to be enjoying just chatting with the fish. I have a couple of questions. I know at one time I knew how long you've had that boat. How old is that?
I built that boat in 2005 or 2006.
So about 15 years old, a little less than that when I looked down. I know when I saw it in the presentation, what you did over at Fort Flagler, which was taking it through like 7 national parks and the rivers, pretty rough rivers.
Yeah.
And so you kept talking about it had some dings. But you must always photograph the good side, because it didn't show in the pictures. But I went down there, and I remember I met you at the boat, and there were some pretty good sized patches inside. So you did have some pretty good hits, and they were kind of beauty marks. You didn't try to hide them, and you just made a good solid repair.
Well, it's pretty intimidating, that article I wrote in Epoxy Works that's in there right now, just published a couple of days ago. I talked about how nervous I was the first time I took my boat to Port Townsend, because you got some real serious woodworking, boat building skills there. And I'm just a river rat with a boat that's been knocked around a bit, got a lot of stories to it. But the thing with a naturally finished boat is you're on display. I mean, how you fix your boat, guys can look at it and say, that was a good fix, or that was pretty sloppy. So that kind of made me a little bit nervous, but everybody in Port Townsend is so nice. And I don't mind showing off because I got a good story that goes with every one of those scars, and you know, I'm kind of proud of it. It's like, you know, it doesn't sit in the garage. It goes out there and does what it does, and it's I absolutely love that boat.
Yeah, well, it was a boat with character, and
character. That's it. That's what it's got. It's got character.
Right, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the talk after with you, and I've enjoyed tonight. I will send a link out that people can see what you did with OPB. That was a very good show that I watched, and if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and include some ways if they want to contact you to just for questions. Yeah. You've shared a lot of information.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants my favorite fishing holes on the Mackenzie for steelhead, I'd be happy to share it.
Well, and I know Forrest is going to want to build one of those tables now. I'll probably see a picture of you two on a river someplace.
Great.
Well,
I want to build it.
Oh, Forrest?
I just said, yeah, I want to build it.
I knew you would like his style. And I didn't hear anything about the non-nylon tent either. I knew you'd love that.
I was wondering about, I mean, he's so into wooden boats, Greg. I was wondering if you fish bamboo, hey?
You know, I've only got so much time for so many obsessions. And a couple of those that I knew for my own good I should avoid is tying my own flies. I do a little bit, but not very much. And bamboo rods, I'm afraid that's one rabbit hole that I could get lost in. So I've kind of avoided that just a little bit.
Amen to that.
All right. Anything else? Anybody else have a question before we finish? All right. Well, thank you very much, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Chris. Chris, do we know what our program is in the following month?
Yeah. I think next month is Dave McCoy from Emerald Waters, and it's going to be on cutthroat and steelhead in the Puget Sound area.
Okay. Thanks so much.